Welcome to today's current news. Today is Friday, April 5th, 2024. Today we will be listening to NPR. Billions of cicadas will buzz this spring as two broods emerge at the same time. NPR. Kamala Harris called for a ceasefire in Gaza. Here's what we know about the talks. NPR. Judge rules Trump's Mar-a-Lago classified documents case can proceed. BBC. How the solar eclipse may affect the brain and bring people together. AP. Powerball jackpot reaches $1.23 billion as long odds mean lots of losing, just as designed. Billions of cicadas will buzz this spring as two broods emerge at the same time. Much of the eastern United States can prepare for what one entomologist described as a spectacular macabre Mardi Gras this spring. The event Jonathan Larson, an extension entomologist at the University of Kentucky, is referring to is the simultaneous emergence of two cicada broods that will erupt in states from Virginia to Illinois come late April through June. Periodical cicadas, which have the longest known insect life cycle, spend most of their life underground in an immature nymph form before surfacing from the ground every 13 or 17 years for a brief adult life. A brood constitutes multiple species of cicadas that emerge on the same cycle. It's like a graduating class that has a reunion every 17 or 13 years, says Gene Kritsky, professor emeritus of biology at Mount St. Joseph University and author of A Tale of Two Broods, the 2024 emergence of periodical cicada broods. Although cicadas are a valuable food source for birds and small mammals in large numbers, their deafening calls can be annoying and their carcasses littering the ground can be a nuisance. The last time the northern Illinois brood emerged 17 years ago, they were out in such abundant numbers that the Chicagoans were having to remove them with shovels to clear sidewalks and road, said Floyd Shockley, an entomologist and the collections manager for the Department of Entomology at the National Museum of Natural History. The last time the two broods emerged simultaneously was in 1803. Shockley says their surfacing makes for an extremely rare, once-in-a-lifetime event. Brood, known as the Great Southern Brood, contains 4 species of cicadas and emerges only every 13 years. The Northern Illinois brood is on a 17-year cycle and contains 3 species of cicadas. Shockley says the Great Southern Brood will start appearing in late April through the first or second week of May across 15 states, mostly in the South, running from Virginia and into Alabama and Mississippi. As for the Northern Illinois brood, Shockley says people will start to see these cicadas closer to mid-May through the first week of June. The brood will be highly concentrated across 4 states, including Illinois, parts of Wisconsin, Indiana, and a bit of Michigan. Across the East, Kritsky says, we'll probably see billions of cicadas due to the dual emergence of the two broods. While you may hear or see cicadas in your area well into September, the periodical cicadas will die off by June, their song replaced by annually occurring cicadas for the rest of the summer. Once the ground reaches the optimal temperature of 64 degrees Fahrenheit, the insects find their way to nearby trees and shed their skins. Kritsky said, it takes about 4 or 5 days for the adult male to start singing, but once they do, their songs can be louder than a jet engine. The male cicadas produce this chorus that attracts the females to the trees, says Larson. Then they'll pair up and have courtship songs, singing individually to female cicadas in an attempt to persuade them to mate. After mating, the female cicada lays her eggs in a tree and then they die, littering the base of trees and leaving behind what Kritsky describes as a delicate rotten Limburger cheese smell. The cycle begins all over when the cicada eggs drop from the tree, returning to the ground for another 13 to 17 years. Although they spend years underground in an immature state, the adult lifespan of a cicada ranges only from 4 to 6 weeks. It's pretty much this big spectacular macabre Mardi Gras, says Larson. It's a lot of singing, lots of paramours pairing up, and then lots of dying. While the two broods this spring will mostly be separated by time and place, they will overlap for several weeks in Illinois, says Shockley. This overlap could result in some Illinois residents hearing all 7 species of the two broods singing their cacophonous mating calls together, he says. Additionally, Shockley says that the overlap could result in an extremely rare opportunity for genetic crossing between 13-year cicadas and 17-year cicadas that could lead to the emergence of a new brood. All the experts NPR spoke with emphasized that the bug's ephemeral emergence is not harmful to humans or pets. While the sheer amount of them may be shocking if you're in certain high-density areas, they won't bite or sting you, says Larson. Your pets will probably try to eat them, he adds, and they're going to be okay. Shockley added not to spray pesticides on the bugs. The chemicals could impact birds and small mammals that might feed on the cicadas, or it could hit non-target things like butterflies and bees that you actually want to have around your home, he says. While Larson says people may be disgusted by the situation, he emphasized that it's unique, beautiful spectacle of nature that you can't encounter anywhere else in the world. Kritsky described the short-lived emergence of the cicadas as like having a David Attenborough special in your backyard, referring to the British naturalist and broadcaster. If you're lucky enough to live in an area where these things are going on, get your kids out there. Watch this. Kamala Harris called for a ceasefire in Gaza. Here's what we know about the talks. Vice President Kamala Harris is scheduled to meet with Benny Gantz, a member of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu war cabinet, as pressure builds for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in the war in Gaza. Monday's meeting in Washington, D.C. comes one day after Harris called for an immediate temporary ceasefire in Gaza to facilitate an exchange of Israeli hostages for Palestinian prisoners and detainees. Harris is expected to continue pressing Israel to pause the fighting and allow more humanitarian aid into Gaza. As Harris and Gantz meet in Washington, mediators will also be convening in Egypt to discuss the outlines of a potential agreement. According to an Egyptian source close to the talks, a Hamas delegation will be in Cairo until Tuesday, meeting with mediators from Egypt and Qatar to broker a deal that would include a 6-week ceasefire, as well as the exchange of dozens of Israeli hostages taken captive by Hamas for several hundred Palestinian prisoners and detainees held by Israel. The source told NPR that Hamas is demanding temporary housing in Gaza until reconstruction is completed in the enclave, where at least 60% of homes have been destroyed by the war. They also want a withdrawal of Israeli troops and for Palestinians who have been displaced from the northern Gaza to be able to return. In the talks, an Israeli official tells NPR, Israel is demanding to know how many hostages are alive. The goal has been to secure a ceasefire deal prior to the start of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, which begins around March 10th, in order to allow more humanitarian aid into Gaza. Gantz has already issued an ultimatum to Hamas. Return the hostages by the start of Ramadan, or the fighting will continue everywhere to include the Rafah area. Rafah, the southernmost city in Gaza, is where over 1 million displaced Palestinians have been sheltering for weeks, and where Israel says a number of Hamas battalions remain. The Israeli military has been carrying out sporadic strikes there, including a strike on Saturday afternoon that killed 11 people and wounded at least 50 others, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. In a separate strike to eastern Rafah on Saturday, 14 members of the same family were killed, and as many as 10 others were trapped under rubble. According to the United Nations Children Fund, over 600,000 children are trapped in Rafah, and there is nowhere safe for them to go. Previous negotiations in Cairo and in Doha, Qatar failed to achieve any breakthroughs with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, calling Hamas' demands delusional. The current framework under consideration in Cairo is based on the proposal discussed by mediators in Paris last month. If ultimately agreed upon, the deal would be the second ceasefire deal since the start of the conflict on October 7th. That's when Hamas led an attack on Israel, killing 1,200 people and kidnapping 240, according to Israeli officials. The Israeli response has killed more than 30,500 Palestinians, according to the Gaza Ministry of Health. In the first and so far only ceasefire, more than 100 hostages were released in exchange for nearly 250 Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. Children are dying at alarming rate. Hamas is also pushing for the largest amount of aid possible to reach people in Gaza, according to an Egyptian sources close to the negotiations. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is spiraling, with at least a quarter of the enclave 2.2 million residents now, one step away from famine, according to the UN Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. On Friday, the World Health Organization said it recorded the 10th child in Gaza to have starved to death. WHO spokesperson Christian Lindmeier said that the actual number of child deaths from starvation can unfortunately be expected to be higher. Adele Kaur, Regional Director for the Middle East and North Africa at UNICEF, called for entry points that would allow us to bring aid in from all possible crossings, including northern Gaza, and security assurances and unimpeded passage to redistribute aid at scale across Gaza with no denials, delays, and access impediments. Safety for the distribution of humanitarian aid has remained a constant concern, especially in northern Gaza. Palestinians say Israeli soldiers fired on them when they tried to get food from an aid convoy in Gaza City on Thursday, with the shooting and surrounding chaos resulting in at least 115 deaths. The Israeli military on Sunday released a statement saying most of the civilians died in a stampede and that Israeli soldiers only responded to civilians approaching them. Several countries have resorted to airdropping aid into Gaza, including most recently in the U.S., which on Saturday dropped over 38,000 meals in a joint operation with the Jordanian Air Force. Gantz's visit reveals tensions. Israeli media reports that Gantz's visit to Washington was not pre-authorized by the Prime Minister's office, and the net has asked that the Israeli embassy decline to facilitate Gantz's trip and to not allow any embassy staff to attend any of his meetings. There are also reports of a heated phone conversation in which Net reportedly told Gantz that Israel has only one prime minister. Minister Gantz is a chairman in the National Unity Party, which is not part of the hardline coalition between Net and Power. The Prime Minister's office declined to respond to a request for a comment about Gantz's visit. However, in a Facebook post, Knesset member Hilly Topper, a member of the National Unity Party, wrote, "There is indeed one Prime Minister for Israel, but we also have one Israel, and anyone who can help for its success in the war must do so. Now it is the time to put the ego aside, put political calculations aside, and concentrate on partnership in the benefit of the State of Israel." Even before the war, there was a rift between Net and Gantz over a number of issues, from Israel's military operations in Gaza to whether ultra-Orthodox men should be compelled into military service. Gantz's visit to Washington comes amid continued demonstrations against Net over the war in Gaza and calls for early elections that are growing louder on the streets. Regular anti-government protests are being held by Israelis who are angry over the fact that he has not been able to free the remaining 134 hostages still being held in captivity. In a speech on Thursday night, Net, who is holding on to power with a narrow majority in the Knesset, dismissed the call for early elections as a tactic of extremists and called for unity in the country. Judge rules Trump's Mar-a-Lago classified documents case can proceed. A federal judge in Florida has denied a motion by former President Donald Trump to dismiss charges against him in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. Trump is charged with illegally withholding and concealing classified documents at Mar-a-Lago after leaving the White House. In their motion, Trump's lawyers asserted that the former president was able to designate classified documents as personal and, under the Presidential Records Act, legally retain them and after his term ended, by taking them to Mar-a-Lago rather than sending them to the National Archives, his lawyers say. Trump was effectively designating them as personal. At a hearing in Fort Pierce last month, prosecutors said the charges against Trump have nothing to do with the Presidential Records Act. In the indictment, he is charged with 32 counts of violating the Espionage Act. In denying the defense motion, U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon, a Trump appointee, agreed with prosecutors. She wrote, "Those same counts make no reference to the Presidential Records Act, nor do they rely on the statutes for proposing or for purposes of stating an offense." Judge Cannon's order comes 2 days after special counsel Jack Smith told the judge in a court filing that it's vitally important she rule on whether Trump can cite the Presidential Records Act in his defense. That filing came after Cannon ordered prosecutors and Trump lawyers to produce proposed jury instructions citing the Presidential Records Act. If the court wrongly concludes that it does and that it intends to include the PRA in the jury instructions, it must inform the parties of that decision well in advance of trial. Smith wrote, he asked the judge to rule on the issue soon, saying prosecutors might need time to file an appeal. Although she ruled in the government's favor, Cannon reserved some pointed barbs for Smith in Thursday's order. She called his critique of her proposed jury instructions unprecedented and unjust, asking the parties to submit draft jury instructions related to the Presidential Records Act, she said was a genuine attempt in the context of the upcoming trial to better understand the parties' competing positions. Responding to Smith's indictment, he might seek an appeal, Cannon wrote. Any party remains free to avail itself of whatever appellate options it sees fit to invoke. Thursday's decision marks the second time in a month that Cannon has denied a motion by Trump to dismiss the charges. The former president's lawyers have argued that the wording of the statutes of the Espionage Act that he is charged with violating is unconstitutionally vague. In denying their motion, the judge noted that no judge has ever found the statutes unconstitutional. Cannon's rulings mean the case can move forward. However, she has yet to decide on a trial schedule. Prosecutors want the trial to start this summer, while Trump's lawyers think it should be put off until well after the November presidential election. How the solar eclipse may affect the brain and bring people together. Awe-inspiring cosmological events can powerfully influence our psychology. The date is May 28, 585 BC, in what is now present-day Anatolia in Turkey. The Medes, an ancient people from modern-day Iran, and the Lydians, a kingdom from the south of modern-day Turkey, have been fighting for 6 years. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, the war shows a little signs of ending, with neither side making significant progress. It will take a solar eclipse to end the bloodshed. Just as the battle was growing warm, day was of sudden change into night. Herodotus wrote, "The Medes and Lydians, when they observed the change, ceased fighting and were alike anxious to have terms of peace agreed on." We may not see such a dramatic reaction to the total eclipse passing across North America on 8 April this year, but recent research suggests it may nevertheless have a powerful impact on our psychology by evoking the emotion of awe. There are few events more awe-striking than the series of celestial coincidences that allow us to experience a total solar eclipse. It relies on the moon being the exact size and distance from Earth, and in the right orbit to pass in front of the sun and completely block out its light for a few moments. Witnessing such an astonishing event could, according to the research, inspire us all to find greater humility and care for others. People may be more affiliative. They may say that they have closer social ties with others, and they feel more connected to their community, says Sean Goldie, a psychologist at Johns Hopkins University who has investigated the psychological effects of the 2017 eclipse. The shock of immensity. Long neglected by scientific study, awe has become an increasingly fashionable area of scientific study. In the past 2 decades, it has defined as a sense of wonder and amazement, triggered by a perception of vastness that leaves us feeling small in comparison. It's an emotion you feel when you perceive something that is vast, which challenges your view of the world, says Jennifer Steller, a psychologist at the University of Toronto. It is the feeling that you have towards an object or a person that is so extraordinary as to be beyond comprehension. The result can be life-changing, as Thatcher Keltner, a psychologist at the University of California, Berkeley, writes in his book, Awe. The feeling of wonder can quiet the nagging, self-critical, overbearing, status-conscious voice of ourself, our ego, and it empowers us to collaborate, to open our minds to wonders, and to see the deep patterns of life. That's a big claim, but Keltner and his colleagues have accumulated a large body of evidence to support it. In a typical laboratory experiment, psychologists may ask participants to view awe-inspiring videos of natural phenomena before they complete questionnaires and tasks that measure any shift in mindset and behavior. Our ego guides our perceptions and decision-making, but when you feel a self-transcendent emotion like awe, it diminishes the power that it has over you. Jennifer Steller. Consider a study from 2018 that examined the effects of awe on humility. The research team asked half of their participants to watch a short video that slowly zoomed out from Earth into the wider universe, the rest watching a relaxing clip that demonstrated how to build a fence. Afterwards, both groups were asked to spend 2 minutes writing first about their strengths and then their weaknesses. As hypothesized, the participants who had watched the space video were more likely to experience awe, and in their personal statements, they reported significantly fewer strengths before describing their weaknesses. A sign of humility. In another study from the same research paper, the researchers asked a third of their participants to recall a time when they'd felt awe. Another third remembered a time when they'd been amused by something funny, while the rest recalled an uneventful trip to buy their groceries. The participants then answered a series of questions assessing how much, on a scale of 0 to 100%, various factors had contributed to their life's accomplishments. These included their own talent or external forces such as luck or God. You would expect that someone with greater humility would be more likely to recognize those external forces, and that's exactly what the researchers discovered for the participants who had been primed to feel awe. This makes sense if awe reduces your self-importance and self-focus, says Steller, who was the first author of the paper. Our ego guides our perceptions and decision-making, but when you feel a self-transcendent emotion like awe, it diminishes the power that it has over you. Blurred boundaries. Besides making us humbler about our abilities, the shrinking of the ego may also help us to see people in a new light. When I have diminished focus on myself, the line between you and me can blur. I might see us all part of the web of humanity, says Steller. Along these lines, researchers have participants to depict how close they felt to their community. They were given pairs of circles, one of which represented themselves, while the other represented the people around them. The pictures look a little like a Venn diagram, with the amount of overlap representing the strength of the connection to the community and its importance in their overall identity. The method may sound a little arcane, but it is a standard measure of social connection, and after viewing an awe-inspiring video, the participants chose circles with a considerably bigger overlap. I was searching for a way of studying people who were experiencing something really momentous. Sean Goldie. We can see similar effects in a study by S. Catherine Nelson Coffey, a psychologist at the University of New South Wales, Australia, and her colleagues, who asked a group of 47 participants to take a virtual reality spacewalk, accompanied by an audio clip narrating a text adapted from Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot. These participants were considerably more likely to endorse statements such as, "I felt closer to others and all of humanity," than another group of people who had instead looked at a small model of the Earth and Pluto. Including awe can even nudge people towards more altruistic behavior. Paul Piff, a professor of psychology at the University of California, Irvine, and colleagues asked people to watch a clip of the BBC's Planet Earth series. They were subsequently more likely to share tickets for a $100 raffle compared to people who had watched scenes from the BBC comedy Walk on the Wild Side. The eclipse itself. As intriguing as these experiments are, they may not necessarily reflect people's spontaneous reactions to natural phenomena outside of the laboratory, a concern that troubled Sean Goldie as he embarked on his PhD. I was searching for a way of studying people who were experiencing something really momentous, he says. The eclipse of 2017 provided an answer. The rare alignment of the moon and the sun, resulting in a spectacular corona, seemed highly eager to trigger feelings of awe. Even better, the event was highly likely to inspire posts on social media, which could offer the perfect opportunity to measure their immediate responses to the event. To collect his data, Goldie turned to the social media site formerly known as Twitter by extracting location details from the users' profiles. Goldie was able to predict which tweeters would have witnessed the total eclipse and who missed the full spectacle. He then performed linguistic analysis of the text in the posts themselves. Words such as amazing or mind-blowing were considered to represent awe. For example, while those cautious language may be and perhaps represented humility, pro-sociality, meanwhile, was coded with words such as care or volunteer, as well as terms of gratitude and love. The results were elegant enough to inspire wonder themselves. The people in the path of the eclipse were about 2 times more likely to express awe in their tweets. As predicted, this was associated with greater humility and pro-sociality. The effects could also be seen in people's pronouns. The people who were able to witness the eclipse were more likely to use the first person plural, we or us, that reflect a collective experience compared to those outside the eclipse's trajectory. Goldie emphasizes that the effects were relatively short-lived. It was only within a 24-hour period. But even brief moments or enhanced connection should be a welcome relief from the tensions in our everyday interactions. In this age of polarization and social division, we can at least find common ground in our amazement at the universe around us. And that's worth savoring if you manage to witness the spectacle on April 8th. Powerball jackpot reaches $1.23 billion as long odds mean lots of losing, just as designed.
We have a truly life-changing jackpot for you. It is worth an estimated $1.131 billion. Good luck to you. Here are tonight's winning numbers. Starting out with the number 11, and right after that, America, we have the number 62. Next number down is 65. That's followed by 38. And we're going to wind it up for you tonight with the number 41. All right, now for your winning Powerball number, it is 15, and that power play multiplier is 3. We have a truly...
Powerball will match a record for lottery drawing Saturday night with a stretch of more than 3 months without a jackpot winner. It's that string of futility that has enabled Powerball's top prize to reach $1.23 billion, the 8th largest in the U.S. lottery history. And it's a sign that the game is operating exactly as designed, with long odds creating a massive jackpot that entices people to drop $2 on a ticket. It means no one should ever expect to match all 6 numbers and hit it rich, though it's likely someone eventually will. About those odds. The last time someone won the Powerball jackpot was on New Year's Day, when a player in Michigan hit a $842.4 million jackpot. Since then, there have been 40 consecutive drawings without a jackpot winner. The 41st on Saturday night will match the record for most drawings, set twice before in 2022 and 2021. The winless streak isn't a fluke. Lottery officials set the odds at 1 in 292.2 million in hope that jackpots will roll over with each of the 3 weekly drawings until the top prize becomes so enormous that more people will take notice and play. The odds used to be significantly better at 1 in 175 million, but were made tougher in 2015 to create the humongous jackpots. Lottery officials at that time also made it easier to win smaller prizes, and they note that the overall odds of winning something are about 1 in 25. More about those odds. It's hard to envision what odds of 1 in 292.2 million mean. One way to think of it is roughly 322 million people who live in spots where they can buy Powerball tickets. 5 states don't participate. If each person bought 1 ticket, you would expect 1 person to win and hundreds of millions of people to lose. Powerball's long odds. There are 292.2 million number combinations possible in the Powerball drawing. Players have better odds to win smaller prizes, but the odds quickly get steeper as they approach the jackpot. With a $4 prize, odds in 1 in 38 or in 92, a $7 prize, 1 in 701, and so on. What does 1 in 292 million look like? The Rose Bowl football stadium in Pasadena, California has about 90,000 seats. Now picture 3,247 Rose Bowls. 1 seat in one of those stadiums represents a winning ticket. Put another way, the odds of winning the jackpot are a little worse than flipping a coin and getting heads 28 straight times, according to Andrew Swift, a University of Nebraska Omaha mathematics professor. A bit more about those odds. Of all the people who bought lottery tickets for the last drawing Wednesday night, only 22.6% of the 292 million possible numbers combinations were covered. According to the Multi-State Lottery Association, that means that 77.4% of number combinations were not covered, and it's an indication of why people so rarely win a jackpot. Remember, the odds of an individual ticket winning never changes, but as more people play, more number combinations will be covered and the odds of someone winning rise. And as bad as Powerball odds are, they're a little better than Mega Millions, the other nearly national lottery game, which has had jackpot odds of 1 in 302.6 million. And to be fair, someone won a 1.13 Mega Millions prize last month, the payoff, and why it's smaller than you think. Without a doubt, the Powerball jackpot is an incredible amount of money, but it's also less than you might expect. That's because while officials tout the $1.23 billion prize, that is for a sole winner who chooses to be paid through an annuity, with an immediate payment and then annual payments over 29 years. Winners almost always opt for cash, which for Saturday night's drawing would be an estimated $595.1 million. Regardless of the payment option, a big chunk of the winnings would go toward taxes, though the amount would vary depending on winners' other assets and whether their state taxes lottery winnings. Just note that the top federal income tax rate is 37%, meaning a lot of the winnings would go to Washington. Thank you for joining me today. Have a great day.